First, as a reminder, we are recording this session, so we will have it available for you to access later and review or to share with others that you would like to see this as well. So just so you're aware, we are recording. First, we would like to begin by acknowledging that we are here today where I am, where the CAN National Office is, and at the Carleton University campus. We're located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation, and we're very grateful to live and work in this beautiful territory. My name is Mandy Crespo, and I'm the Program Manager of the Canadian Accessibility Network. I'm thrilled to have you all here today. We have a lot of people joining us. We did have over 100 people register for today, so there is a lot of interest in accessibility and procurement, and rightfully so. So welcome to our event today. The Canadian Accessibility Network is a bilingual network. The event today, however, will be only in English. We do have, as you might have noticed, we do have ASL today, and we also do have live captioning. If you would like to view the live transcript or the live captioning, you have a few different ways that you can do that. You can do that by clicking on the CC button on the bottom of your screen, or the little arrow next to the CC button, and you can select either view subtitles or view full transcript. Also in the chat, I hope you can see, and if not, Sarah can recopy and paste. Perfect, thank you, Sarah. There are two different links in the chat for subtitles. There is either an English subtitle link or there's a French subtitle link. So you can choose either French or English subtitles by clicking on those. If you cannot see the captions, or if you're having any other technical issues during the session, feel free to put a comment in the chat and we'll do our best to help troubleshoot any issues you may have. For the majority of the event today, we will ask that you keep your cameras off and your microphones muted. We will have time throughout the presentation and after the presentation for questions and comments. Please feel free to use the chat throughout the presentation and at the end of the session. And we will invite you at different times to raise your real or your virtual hand if you do have questions. So the first thing we would like to do today is get a sense of who is here in our virtual room. I'm going to start a poll and ask that you answer the question in the poll. So here I'm gonna, give me just a second. Looks like I need to restart it. Just a second, relaunch poll. Here we go. So hopefully you can see that window now pop up. The question is, you can answer one of the following. I work in public procurement. I work in private procurement. I am a supplier of goods and services, or I am here out of general interest. I see lots of people answering. I'll give you a minute to answer this question. Okay. Okay, looks like it's slowing down. So I'm going to end the poll. And here's our results. We have 48% that work in public procurement, 5% in private procurement, 7% as a supplier, and 40% here out of general interest. So we have a wide variety of interest here today. Perfect. I'll close that down. Wonderful. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully you are here for the CAN Connect Forum, Accessibility in Procurement. If you're not, you're in the wrong place. So hopefully you're in the right place. And if not, stay around anyway. I'm sure there's something to learn for you, even if you're in the wrong place. I would like to give a quick introduction to our two speakers today, and they will introduce themselves even more during the presentation. So we have Deidre Guy, the founder and president of Inclusive Workplace and Supply Council of Canada, the IWSCC. And we have Jeff Wilson, the founder and CEO of Adaptability Canada. And they are here today to share their experience and expertise and really to start a conversation for us about accessibility in procurement. So I will hand it over to you, Jeff and Deidre.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mandy. And just before getting into it, I'd like to put out a huge thanks to the CAN team for all the work they've done and the organization and managing this excellent group to work with. So thank you. I guess, Sarah, if we can get the presentation up, we'll start with that. And then Deidre, do you want to give a quick background and then I'll do mine?
Sure. Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks, Jeff. I echo the thoughts about CAN and the work that they've done to help put this together. Much appreciated. So yes, I'm a co-founder and president of the Inclusive Workplace and Supply Council of Canada. So we're a nonprofit Canadian organization, and we basically are looking to include both veteran and disabled business owners. And of course, today we're talking more about accessible procurement. So we'll focus on disabled entrepreneurs, but improve the representation in supply chains for both corporate as well as government in Canada.
And a little bit of background on me and then the company. So short and sweet, I'm a farmer by birth. I am a serial entrepreneur, and I got into something called experience design back in the late 90s. I have been doing that ever since, and that has evolved gradually into inclusive design and championing the causes of people with disabilities, regardless of where they work, live, or play. Our company is a top consultancy in Canada for inclusive design. We do something actually related to experiential experiential experiences. I know that's a terrible way to sum it up, but in the built environment, specifically in real estate, and now we are branching into things like accessible procurement. So with that, I guess we can get into the presentation. So next screen, Sarah. We just wanted to start out with a few simple definitions as they relate to accessibility and procurement. So procurement, the action of obtaining or procuring something, very straightforward. We're big on simplicity in the work we do. Stakeholders, you'll see that mentioned often in the presentation, I believe. And these are individuals or groups of individuals, could be companies directly involved in the procurement process. Accessibility relates directly to, in this case, the quality of being easy to access, easy to use, easy to understand, and we've added in easy to achieve success, which is something that is left out many, many times when we talk about accessibility in business. And then barriers, partial and full limitations preventing meaningful participation. In the context of procurement, most of the barriers we're going to discuss are invisible barriers. They are not physical barriers. So we just want to frame that out so that people understand the context of what we're talking about when we're speaking about barriers. Next screen, Sarah. So to start, we're going to talk about the current state of procurement. We have 3 slides here, and then we've got time for a quick Q&A of about 3 to 5 minutes, so that we can answer any burning questions there may be on this specific set of information here. So we want to kind of level set everybody's understanding of what we're doing and what procurement looks like from our vantage point. The components of procurement, so we have technology. This includes stuff like procurement systems. So this could be SAP, Oracle. It could be third-party systems like bids and tenders or MERX. It involves the devices that we consume information on. And it involves internal procurement systems inside companies. Could be government, could be big business, small business, but no matter the level, if you have a procurement department, they have a system that they're using to manage procurement. When it comes to policy and processes, we're looking at the rules for procurement. So these are requirements designed by a host of people inside the organization. Typically legal has a big say, The buyers within the corporation or the organization will have a big say. And of course, procurement has a big say on the rules. And those are all then kind of synthesized and put out as rules for engagement for suppliers. And then we have processes for conducting procurement from start to finish. That actually, depending on what you're procuring, can be simple or it can be very complex. Then we have communications, data, and documents. And this is anything from emails, online meetings, face-to-face meetings, calls, templates and forms inside the technology to fill out, questions, proposals, awards, contracts, all these different things are all elements of the communication, data, and documents that happen within procurement. And then lastly, it's the people. When we say internal, external, that's internal referring to the people inside the organization doing the procurement. That can be the procurement department themselves. It can also be internal buyers or internal stakeholders like legal who need to weigh in on certain procurement matters. Externally, we're talking about suppliers. We're talking about potentially the public. And we're talking about folks like tier 1 suppliers who may be tasked with a massive project, but they need to hire other companies to help them fulfill it. And so oftentimes what can happen in projects like that is that a tier 1 supplier will actually hire you, not the organization itself. So we look at all of that. Lastly, we look at attitudes and stigma. We look at relationships and the overall procurement experience. Is it a positive experience? Is it fulfilling? Is it meaningful? What are the attitudes and stigma inside procurement? And are these problematic to evolving towards accessible procurement? Next slide, Sarah. So just kind of a quick rundown of just some of the major kind of areas, posed by questions of what procurement covers. So what is being procured? And then what we've done under the question is we've asked a sub-question related directly to accessibility and people with disabilities. So what is being procured? Are disabled suppliers able to respond? Basic question, right? If so, how, right? How is it procured? Is the process easy to use and understand? A lot of times it's not. How is it used or applied? Is the product or service accessibly designed? One of those considerations that a lot of organizations don't think about is the actual accessible characteristics of a product or service and how that can be consumed by the public or by the organization. How is it communicated? Are the communications accessible, depending on the disability? You can see with captioning and the sign language happening in the sign language interpreting happening right now, that's one of the things that is often missing from procurement. So we want to make sure going forward that stuff like this, being able to use a screen reader, all sorts of other things is involved in the communication side of things. How are we managing the relationship? Are there support programs, training, onboarding? What happens, how do we overcome challenges and work with accommodations in the procurement process? And then lastly, how do we enable full, and I say meaningful participation? Meaningful is so important here, all right? We want people with disabilities to have the chance to advance themselves through the procurement process, be treated well, but also have the ability to do business with these organizations on an equal footing to everyone else. The last part of that is, can the organization work with disabled people? And it's a good question, one we like asking a lot of folks, actually. Next screen, please. So stages of procurement, and these are the major stages. Just to kind of finish our level set here and make sure that the rest of the presentation makes sense back to this stuff. So we have the stages of procurement. So an internal buyer informs procurement of need for product or service. The procurement department works with that buyer or that department to prepare documents, prepare and reviewed internally, sometimes by legal as well. Procurement then issues sometimes via a third-party service or internally, an RFI, RFQ, or RFP. An RFI is a request for information, an RFQ is a request for a quote, and an RFP is a request for a proposal. Just to understand the acronyms there. I'm not big on acronyms, I don't like using them, but sometimes for real estate we have to. Then there's usually, once the procurement documents are issued, you could be invited to it. It could be a general call out to suppliers. There's typically a process that involves a supplier Q&A. There might be meetings involved in that step. And what happens is, once the questions are answered to the best of procurement's ability, proposals are then received. There's a closing deadline, and then they, internally they begin to vet and score the proposals. After that, the bid is awarded and contracted, and the goods and services delivered. So that, we just wanted to give you a good kind of fundamentals on procurement. Now, the other thing I'll say, just advancing to the next screen on questions, is that, let me be clear, we've dealt with a lot of procurement folks over the past years, and specifically recently on our research project. And these are great people. They're out to help. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They have huge obligations back to the organization. There's a firm set of rules legally and financially that they have to follow. And so what we found is that they're working to the best of their ability to try and advance this the best they can, right? These are good people. They're not villains, as oftentimes they can be cast as. In our experience with procurement folks, they've been amazing to work with. So anyway, I just wanted to stop and open it up to a couple questions, if you have them.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. We have a few questions on the screen here, and I might just put the first one in the chat, the same question of if you'd like to answer this question in the chat for us. I think this is a great question on why is it important to ensure accessibility in procurement. If you want to type your answers to that in the chat. Or also we'll pause here for a second and see if you had any questions up to this point for Deidre or Jeff. See, we have a question in the chat here that says, how do you deal with lack of proponents bilingual and accessible?
Right. So by proponents, we're meaning people within the industry and the organization as proponents?
Solutions, it says.
Okay. So I think depending on the organization putting out the procurement, whether that's an RFP or RFQ or RFI, there are certain requirements for them to be bilingual. Certainly in government, there's a strong push for that. But we see accessibility as a parallel track to bilingualism. Both are about access and being able to meaningfully participate. And so far, what we've seen is in the private sector, mostly a lack of bilingualism. More so in the government, you'll see it fairly often. But it is something that needs to be addressed for sure.
Okay, great, thank you. And we have a few other questions here. The next one is, so what would be the questions on an RFP to ensure the procured product is accessible?
We've seen this a few times. So it may not be questions, but it may be part of the scope of work that the organization will put out characteristics for a product or a service to make sure that it is accessibly designed. They may have done some investigation on their own to identify a specific product, or they may be looking for the help of suppliers to identify products that meet the criteria that they put out. If you don't see that, then the questions really are up to you to ask, what are the accessible criteria for the product or service you're procuring? Which is a great question to feed back to any organization doing a procurement.
Great, thank you. And I think I'll just do one more question that's in the chat here, and then we will need to move on to the next section. The next question was, how can you encourage vendors to make changes without the official regulations or updated standards?
Great question. So I think this is, tide lifts all ships. I think really it needs to become something that's part of the industry. I think a lot can be done on the individual level to help start to make these changes, or at least push the need for it. But I think changes to procurement aren't necessarily straightforward and simple. A lot of times they may involve policy changes that need to be reviewed internally. So I think the stuff that can change, such as attitude shifts, can be done without regulations and standards. I think that stuff like requirements for accessible goods and services could be part of what could be done without making things official. There's a lot of unofficial things I think that are small and important. Good communication, as an example, could be part of that. Asking better questions or better onboarding for suppliers would be great. So that just, I mean, off the top of my head, that's the kind of stuff that comes to mind. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Jeff. We do have more questions in the chat, but let's hold off on answering those at this moment. Let's keep going on to the next section, and we'll try to get to those questions as we go as well.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so challenges. This is one that always gives me a little indigestion, but I mean, this is our starting point right now that we're looking at. So we've also framed it out under the easy to access, easy to use and understand, and easy to succeed, or easy to achieve success. So under easy to access, we're looking at third-party platforms and the role they play and the challenges that may exist there, specifically from the technology, from the complexity of the technology. Are the forms, easy to use? Is the information easy to access? Registering with an organization as an official supplier. This can be quite complicated and quite frustrating at times. We've gone through it numerous times. Sometimes it's been easy, sometimes it's been difficult, sometimes we've just bowed out because it was so complex and so difficult we couldn't do it. So that is something that is part of the procurement realm that oftentimes is off the radar. Certainly when it comes to RFPs, RFQs, and RFIs, not being designed with disabled suppliers in mind, is there an alternative document for screen readers? If there's a meeting, is there captioning and ASL interpreting? All of these different things come to play and present specific challenges. A lot of times as well, the big challenge with RFPs, RFQs, and RFIs and the documentation is how complex they are and how much information they put in there that is, takes a law degree to figure out. So this is another aspect that we're looking at. And then tier one suppliers that we talked about before that may have the mandate to hire other suppliers to work for a large organization. A lot of times the requirements are not pushed down to them, or if they are, they don't come through in a way that helps with easy to access challenges. So next screen. Easy to use and understand. So we just talked about how complex, confusing documentation can be. Well, this is a big part of it, right? A lot of times you'll see all the legalese and everything else up front in a document, and the scope of work is buried somewhere else that you struggle to try and find, and you struggle to try and understand it. documents not accessibly designed. We covered that. Procurement systems difficult and confusing. Oftentimes if there's a lobbying component to it that you have to register, that has to be done in parallel or before. Those systems can be very confusing and difficult to use as well. Fourth point, very little ability to ask meaningful questions or have discussion. It seems to be a habit for procurement people, whether it's because they can't give the answers or they believe that the document is sufficient to answer those questions. But a lot of times what happens when you ask questions, you get a response of, please see the scope of work document that's covered there, or something to that degree. And oftentimes the questions asked are about nuances. It may not be obvious, but I think it always begs the question of, should these be answered anyway, just to make sure that everything is clear? And then, of course, the last point is heavy use of acronyms and industry terminology, which can be confusing. Next screen. And then easy to achieve success. I love this one because it really gets to the heart of the matter. Is your point to do business with people with disabilities, or is your point to just look like you're doing business with people with disabilities? So currently, we believe the deck is stacked against people with disabilities for achieving success. There's not a lot of planning for engaging people with disabilities or an understanding of how to work with them. There's little to no onboarding or support programs, and we'll get into that in the next section a little bit more. Requirements that limit success, particularly on considering that most disabled suppliers are small companies. Procurement is oftentimes shaped around doing business with large suppliers, not small ones. And so that kind of leads to the next one is, are we targeting procurement with the right suppliers at the right level? Maybe the best point is to help them meet buyers and work under sole source limits. Most organizations have sole source limits, 5, 10, 25,000 or under, where they can sole source a company to work with them. That may be another track to put disabled suppliers on. And then, sorry, I move kind of quickly on this stuff, but now we're at the questions on the next screen.
Excellent, thank you. I see, yeah, the questions we have here. I would love to see any answers in the chat if you would like, especially on the first question. It says, what are the top 3 most pressing challenges to work on in procurement? I would love to, if you had any thoughts on that question. I see we've got a lot of other questions in the chat here for you, Jeff and Deidre. But I wonder if we might have to, some of these seem like they'll take a longer answer that might be better at the end.
Yeah, and we can always try and answer questions after the fact too, if we don't get to them all. Maybe I can suggest putting out a document to kind of give responses to all the questions that are in chat if we don't get to them. That way everybody has a copy of that too. I just want to make sure that we're helping as much as possible.
Perfect, thank you. I see someone Alex has put in the chat here, the 3 most pressing challenges are finances, stigma, and liability.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree.
Yeah.
A lot of times yeah, there it is about requirements.
Yep, and more about, bids and tenders do not show categories for hardware and software for various disabilities like blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, mobility challenged, learning disabled, adaptive technology, and how do tenders and RF show the requirements of such requirements? Yeah.
Deidre, maybe did you want to answer that one? Because you've been working on that one specifically.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. And that is part of our problem, is the management of categories when it comes to disabled suppliers, or those types of categories that include suppliers that service the disabled community or are also disabled as well. If you're working in the accessibility field for, say, built environment assessments, there's no category that provides that information to the bidding organizations Fortunately, Bids and Tenders is a Canadian organization, and so we are in conversations with them to make some changes, and they're happy to do that. They work with, I think City of Brampton works with Bids and Tenders, so they've been working with us as well to try and make changes to those categories. But right now, it does tend to be very stressful to try and communicate what type of business that you do when these categories are so limiting.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. I think I want to make sure we have enough time to get through your presentation. So how about we keep moving? And as you said, Jeff, if we don't get to any of these questions, we'll make sure to answer them and provide those at either at the end of this or after the presentation as well.
Okay, so I guess next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the support programs that are in place currently specifically for disabled suppliers, but for suppliers in general. So there's training that's put out by purchasing organizations such as Bids and Tenders or SAP Ariba. A lot of those organizations have training within their system that you can access. And sometimes you will see where they're putting out webinars or actual interactive types training sessions with possible and prospective suppliers. So that information is there. It's typically not as accessible as we would like it to be, which we'll discuss shortly. Supplier training and capacity building programs from private organizations. So once again, you'll see circumstances where private companies are creating opportunities to teach prospective suppliers how to get into their supply chain. And then, of course, we have certification as disabled suppliers, which is something that IWSCC does. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well as we go. So Sarah, if you could move us on to the next slide, please. So purchasing organizations and third-party bidding sites. In person, pre-pandemic, these sessions were in person, and post-pandemic or during the pandemic, they are more of a webinar style situation. Not a lot of room for interaction, and not a lot of accessibility elements. Typically there's captioning, but not live captioning. There's no ASL, documentation is not accessible. Languages and references are complicated, lots of acronyms, lots of legalese that's not necessary. And if there are physical requirements to visit a site or to and be part of this in-person training, the physical accessibility measures are just not there. There's also quite a lack of consistency between organizations. So terminologies change, processes change, the platform that you're using changes, and they're not always easy or intuitive to make your way through. And as we've discussed already, these bidding sites and purchasing organizations have limited material group classifications. And so they're very slow to change with this. They run from NAICS codes and different types of coding systems that are a huge animal to try and make changes to, which is why we do like the conversation that we're having with Bids and Tenders, because they're a lot more nimble and able to make those changes. Next slide, please, Sarah. So we have the private organizations that are offering supplier training and capacity building programs. Again, not specific to disabled owned businesses, so you won't see those levels of accessibility in most cases. They tend to say, okay, well, we'll provide it if anyone asks for it. And many people do not ask, even though they may provide or find a benefit to closed captioning or sign language or accessible documentation, they may not ask for it. In many cases, there are fees that apply for this type of training through private organizations. So there's not government funding that's available in a lot of cases, in most cases. And so it's really on yourself to pay the price, to learn how to build your organization, to be able to do business and get trained up to do business with these larger organizations. Also, if this training is physical, then you've got those additional costs. Trying to find an accessible accommodation, which is not easy, additional costs for transportation and accommodation, all of those types of things apply. So not to mention the time involved for these suppliers. And we know that, as Jeff mentioned earlier, there are quite a large number of disabled suppliers who are smaller organizations and maybe don't have the time to spend to learn how to do business with these large organizations that are so inconsistent. Next slide, please, Sarah. Certification as disabled or diverse suppliers. So how the certification process works is your business needs to be at least 51% or more owned and operated and controlled by a person with a disability. This certification is recognized nationally by governments and corporations. There is an annual membership fee involved with the certification process, and they provide being a certified disabled supplier provides access to procurement opportunities both nationally and globally. There is training and mentorship in place for disabled suppliers, training provided by the organization that does the certification, but also mentorship and training provided by corporate members of the organization, and those are done free of charge for certified disabled suppliers. So a lot of purchasers do not have a robust supplier diversity program. They have signed on, are looking to do business with disabled suppliers, but they don't really understand how best to do it, and they have not created a circumstance that's accessible and easy to achieve success, as we've talked about earlier. And IWSCC is the certifying body in Canada for disabled-owned businesses, and we're only in our 4th year. So this supplier diversity is really late to the game for disabled suppliers. I wish I had started the organizer. We had started the organization sooner. We're progressing, but it has been slow, and businesses need to really start to, corporations and governments need to understand the importance of doing business with disabled suppliers and keeping and tracking that information so that they can increase their spend on an annual basis and have an understanding of what percentage. I think most companies would be very shocked to discover how few dollars are being spent in the disability entrepreneur community. So we do have some questions, Sarah, if you can access the next screen, although I don't know, Mandy, if there's some that have come into the chat. But
yeah, well, we do have some questions here in the chat that are around cost associated with expenses. So one is accessibility testing can be very expensive. Who should bear the cost, the enterprise or the vendor?
So that would just depend on what it is that you're referring to that has to be tested from an accessibility perspective. I think that organizations that are using third-party organizations such as bids and tenders, if a company is going to use bids and tenders, I think it's on that company to ensure that bids and tenders or whatever other third-party bidding site that they're using is accessible. And so if it is not, then I think it's on the third-party organization to get accessible, but that's going to be largely demanded by their customer base. So if customer base is not looking for that, then they're not going to put the dollars into it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And I see another comment here says, I find it hard to include testing for undefined requirements that might come up only during a consultation with people with disabilities that are doing testing. This may be seen as a lack of transparent standards and requirements at the start of the process. I also find it hard to access partners of solutions. For example, a solution crawling a video conference system to create live captions. Are these usually in or out of scope during a solution assessment?
Yeah, so I think that goes back to the very basic thought of accessibility, and where it tends to be an add-on instead of an inclusion right from the beginning. So no matter what you're doing with your organization, accessibility needs to be a thought at the very front of your process. And so the same thing goes with anything that you're doing with regards to the procurement process needs to be designed accessible right from the beginning. So many organizations are playing catch up, and that's where we have these kinds of difficulties for accessing things effectively and making sure that there's the same playing field for everyone that is looking to provide goods and services to organizations across Canada.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think let's, there's more questions, but like we said, we are, we're keeping all of these questions in a document now, so we'll make sure to answer them if we don't get to them at the end of the event today. We'll send them out afterwards as well. So, okay, so we'll keep it moving, Deidre.
Okay, next slide. Jeff, are you going to take this one? Oh, you're there, okay.
I can if you'd like. Absolutely.
Sure.
Sorry, I was just, sparing people my ugly mug. So future procurement, what does it look like? What is, what's that experience going to be? And we're all about experiences. So I think, first of all, there needs to be work done on the easy to access side. This means work done not only on internal procurement systems, but on third-party procurement systems to really kind of balance things for people with disabilities. That means, in our mind, simplification, powerful simplification, if you will, to make sure that these platforms and these systems are easy to access and easy to use, easy to understand. Consolidation of procurement requirements. What we mean by this is looking at not just the requirements for that specific thing, but what outside of that is also required. So this goes to the accessibility components of a product or service, right? It goes to how we want you to work with tier 1 suppliers, right? And making introductions to actually meet those tier 1 suppliers virtually or in person, to understand their needs, how they want to work, and how they're being held accountable to the procurement organization or the end buyer. Creating proper onboarding programs is huge. Understood. Thank you, Michaela. Creating proper onboarding programs is a big deal. Right now, they're in our mind completely insufficient. A lot of times you'll get an RFP document that says, okay, we need this, and by the way, you need these security clearances. You know, the deadline for response is 3 weeks, and it'll take 3 months to get the security clearances necessary to bid. So there's a real kind of desynchronization on a lot of things that onboarding programs can fix. And certainly the last point, engaging tier 1 suppliers and keeping them accountable to pushing requirements down for doing business with disabled suppliers is going to be huge, because a lot of times in our experience, it hasn't been the case at all. Next slide. Easy to use and understand. So simplifying documents and making them accessible. This should be a price of entry in our mind, and one of the first things that's taken care of. Simplifying the technology used to manage procurement and manage communications inside of procurement is huge as well. This goes to the actual, like the fundamentals of meaningful participation. Allow real discussions about the process and help build confidence in suppliers, and get rid of jargon. All of this, by the way, or most of it, is relatively easy and straightforward to do. The second point, simplifying technology, not so much. That's a big lift, but there are small things that can be done along the way. And then next screen, Sarah. And then easy to achieve success. Again, my favorite topic. Understand truly how to work with disabled suppliers and individuals. This includes disabled buyers inside the organization and how they need to work with procurement. Create preparation programs to help small companies meet requirements and understand what procurement organizations expect from them. Procurement shift to allow partial spend to only small companies could be part of a larger project. Maybe we can start to break bigger projects apart to source some smaller, participation from disabled suppliers and other diverse suppliers, not just disabled suppliers, but the whole spectrum of diverse suppliers. And then lastly, arrange meetings with appropriate buyers inside the organization. This is kind of a follow-on to point 3. Build relationships that allow disabled suppliers to actually achieve success with that company. Build a relationship with these folks. That's really what this is about, right? And, this goes to the whole stigma thing. It goes to, how to build meaningful relationships and how to get full participation. Last slide is questions.
If I can add a little something in there, Jeff,
Yeah.
I think it's also important to start to track the spend with disabled suppliers, right? Start to take a look at who do you have already that's existing in your supply chain that is disabled or diverse. Put the question out there, talk to your vendors. A simple a survey perhaps, or something when they register, so that they can self-identify, and so you can start to get an understanding of what your spend is like now. What we find with organizations is often they discover that some of their top vendors are actually disabled suppliers, and they didn't realize that because they didn't ask the question. And so they're going on that stigma that disabled suppliers are all small organizations that don't have a lot of capacity. And the reality is that that is the case sometimes, but that's not always the case. And that's not a reason not to procure with these individuals. So start to measure and then track and then set goals to increase that spend on an annual basis.
Great. And I see we have a few questions in the chat here, so one says, do you have any advice for balancing simplification of documents and legal heavy documents?
So yes, we do. However, take my advice or my counsel right now with a grain of salt, please, because it's still, you know, wet cement. We're still working through this kind of stuff. So what I can say is that while legal will oftentimes require, you know, legal heavy documents in an RFP or the procurement process, it doesn't mean we can't create some plain language interpretations to accompany that legal heavy stuff. We've seen this done in the past. It was extremely effective. What it was is, you know, for each legal statement, there was also a plain language kind of subtext that explained the legalese in simple, you know, easy to understand language. It was actually really kind of breathtakingly powerful and simple, that anyone without a law degree could really understand what was going on. And I think, you know, proper design of the document really, really helps. Certainly ease of reading, proper font sizes, stuff like that. You know, making sure everything is designed for screen readers, but also if you can say it in 5 words instead of 10, do that, right? A lot of procurement documentation can be very verbose. And so removing that really, really helps.
Thank you, Jeff.
I think also if you can take a look at sort of compartmentalizing a lot of that legalese and put it into perhaps when suppliers register onto the site, then they are able to take a look at a lot of the standard legalese that goes into every RFP and read it at that point. And then the RFP document itself can say, please refer to, so that when you're opening up this document, it doesn't end up being 97 pages long, where 7 pages are applicable to the actual project and 90 of them are just the standard blurb that's cut and paste by every organization. And perhaps these purchasing organizations could take a look at what that cut and paste is and really significantly reduce it, because when we look through a lot of those from an RFP perspective, a lot of it does not apply to the particular job that they're bidding. So it doesn't make sense to have that words there. It's going to take time. But it's really important, and you're not going to get proper response from a whole pile of suppliers that could probably provide you with fantastic goods or service because they're daunted and basically this barrier is in front of them, and it's a barrier to moving forward in the RFP process.
Thank you. Thank you. I see there's a lot more questions coming in on the chat, and I just want to make sure this is the end of the presentation, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Last slide. Just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
I thought we were there. So
Yep.
Some of the other questions coming in here, we have one that says, great presentations. Apologies if I missed this, but do you have any guidance for smaller procurement pieces that often don't have to go through centralized processes? At our institution, below a certain dollar value means that business officers or purchasers are sort of on their own, so to speak.
Yeah, so this happens in a lot of organizations, and I've actually had 3 conversations in the last 2 days with prospective corporate members of IWSCC asking this same question with procurement opportunities that are under 100,000 or even under 25,000. And so the City of Toronto is a great example of what they have done with this, and I think the City of Brampton has followed along as well, where for those sizes of procurement opportunities, they require their purchasers to find at least one diverse supplier to bid on that opportunity. So every time these purchasers go in to find suppliers, they also are encouraged and sometimes it's within policy, to go through the list of diverse suppliers as well, check out those keywords, find out who else is a possible supplier for this opportunity, and ensure that they are invited. But it is something that you need to explain to the entire organization. So we talk about talking to people at the top of the organization to get that buy-in, but then also at a grassroots level where people understand the importance of procuring with diverse organizations. Everybody in your organization knows someone who owns a business, and there's a good chance that those people, those business owners, are diverse. So if you can share this information with across the procurement, but across the organization as well, it creates that sense of community where your people who work for you are saying, hey, you know what? Our organization actually supports suppliers like you, businesses like yours. We are behind that, and that creates that acceptance at a grassroots level, and it shows people the reality and the personal part of making the decision to procure with a disabled supplier. We also know that disabled suppliers, as they grow and revenue is increased for them, they will hire within their own community, and they will also procure within their own community or other diverse communities. So the decision of a purchaser to do business with a disabled supplier can have this fantastic snowball effect within the economy. And this is information that I think is really important to share with your entire organization.
Excellent, thank you. And I think we're going to run out of time here pretty soon. It's amazing how quickly this goes, but I'm going to have one more question here in the chat that we could cover, and then we probably will have to bring it to a close and answer other questions in a document afterwards. So another question is this certification a well-known program among suppliers? How can we easily identify disability-led suppliers otherwise? Could the federal government use this as a reliable data source for results measurement to track percentage of contracts issued to those suppliers?
Oh, if only. First of all, I just would like to differentiate between disability-led and disability-owned. We at IWSCC, we have a focus on disability owned, and the difference is who benefits the most with procurement with this organization. So if it's an organization that is not disability owned and has a number of disabled employees, that's great. It keeps the organization going. Those employees make their hourly wage, but the benefits, the overall benefits, go to the actual owner. And the decision-making process is made by someone who does not have the experience of lived disability. And this is what our corporate members are looking for, is that innovation, that outside of the box thinking. We always say when you live outside the box, you think outside the box and you work outside the box. And so that's it, that innovation and that thinking that our corporations are looking for. So disabled owned is very, very key, and I think very important in terms of serving the disability community. IWSCC is doing our best to make sure that the information gets out there about the ability to certify with our organization. And we do have the federal government, pardon me, my allergies, that do support us. And we are working with them as well as other diverse supplier organizations to include diverse supplier language and in their procurement policy that's currently being written. So once that language gets in there, then they'll start to be able to track and measure, and then we can start to take a look at some of the stats. But we know that those dollars are very low right now.
Great. Perfect, thank you. We're going to run out of time here. I think we're going to be at the end of our time together, and I just want to take a minute to say thank you, Jeff and Deidre. What an incredible presentation, and I think you've brought up so many topics that we could spend hours discussing. There is so much more to say, and so I want to invite all of you, if you do have other questions that we did not get covered today, please feel free to put more questions in the chat right now, and we will put them in a document and answer those questions for you and send it out afterwards. We do have another Can Connect forum coming up in April. It's coming up on Tuesday, April 26th, also from noon to 1 Eastern Standard Time. And this one is for anyone that's involved in post-secondary education. We're calling it a post-secondary conversation. We will have no presenter at that one. We will do more of a discussion-based event. There will be 3 different breakout rooms. One will be on career and employment supports for students with disabilities, moderated by Jennifer May from Accessibility Experiential Learning Coordinator at Thompson Rivers University. We'll have another room about accessibility and language, moderated by Elizabeth McGilvray from Bow Valley College, and a third room at that event for federal and provincial mandate compliance in a post-secondary environment, moderated by Ben Poynton from University of Toronto, who I believe is also in the audience today. Hello, Ben. We will be sharing the recording of this event with you afterwards, the slides and any links that came up, as well as I mentioned, a document answering some questions that we did not get to answer today, so watch for that email. We will also, in the chat here, we'll be sharing Deidre and Jeff's contact information. So if you would like to reach out to them and have more of a conversation or have more questions, please feel free to reach out to them as well. The Canadian Accessibility Network, we are looking for more involvement, more collaborators, and there's no cost to be a part of CAN. If you would like to have your organization or you as an individual would like to be a part of CAN, please feel free to reach out to us, send us an email, and we would be happy to tell you more about CAN. And lastly, we also have a feedback form. This is only our second CAN Connect forum, and we are looking for ways to improve. We always will be, but especially now it's new, so we very much value your feedback. In the chat, Sarah will be sharing a link to our feedback form, so please it's very simple, take 1 minute, fill out the feedback form, and let us know what went well today and what we could improve upon. So I think that is everything we have for you here today. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Thank you again to Jeff and to Deidre for sharing your expertise and your knowledge, and so much we have to learn from you and your experiences. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. And thanks everyone for attending. Thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye everyone.
Bye.